Most men find out their wife has a secret with a phone call in the middle of the night. I found out mine with a plumber's flashlight, and by the time I understood what that flashlight had found, I'd already spent 3 days living in a house that wasn't the one I thought I owned. My name is Walter Pruett. I'm 64 years old. I spent 31 years installing cabinets for a living, and for the last 4 I've been retired, which mostly means I fix things around the house nobody asked me to fix and referee arguments between my knees and the stairs. I have 2 grown kids who call on Sundays, and a wife, Marilyn, who I married the year Reagan was still in office, 38 years. I want you to sit with that number for a second, folks, because I did. 38 years, and I would have told you, right up until 11 days ago, that I knew that woman better than I knew my own hands. Marilyn likes her tomato plants, the Hallmark Channel, and she takes her tea black with a little honey, never sugar, honey specifically, because sugar, she says, is for people in a hurry. I'm not in a hurry. Haven't been in a hurry since I retired. I know this woman, knew her, thought I did. Before I get into it, I want to ask you for something, and I promise I'll only ask once. If you're the kind of person who likes hearing these stories, hit that subscribe button, tap like, and tell me in the comments what you'd have done in my shoes, because I still go back and forth on whether I did right. All right, let me tell you what happened. It started on a Monday in October, which around here means the leaves are down and the gutters are full, which is exactly why I'd called a man out to clear ours. Marilyn was 3 states away in Charleston, visiting her sister Pat, a trip she'd taken every fall for as long as I could remember. She'd been gone 4 days. I was doing what a man does when his wife's away, grilling more meat than one person should eat, leaving dishes in the sink out of pure defiance, and enjoying every guilty minute of it. The gutter man's name was Ray Doss, out of a little outfit called Doss and Sons. Showed up right on time, ladder already strapped to his truck, the kind of fellow who calls you sir without you asking him to. I'll knock this out in half an hour, Ray said, and climbed up onto the roof over the back porch. I went inside, poured myself some coffee, and turned on a ball game I didn't much care about, just for the noise. About 20 minutes in, my phone buzzed. Text from Ray. Sir, there's a crawl space hatch back here under the porch decking that's been screwed shut from underneath. You know anything about that? I laughed a little, typed back, Ray, we don't have a crawl space hatch under that porch. That porch is poured concrete. 3 dots. Then, sir, it's right here. Somebody framed it in special and screwed a hatch over it from the inside. And there's a smell coming up through the gap, like something's been burning down there or something spoiled real bad. I stopped mid-sip. A hatch that shouldn't exist, screwed shut from the underneath, which meant whoever built it wanted it opened from inside that space, not from where I was standing. That detail sat wrong in my stomach before my brain caught up to why. You don't screw a door shut from the inside, unless you're planning on somebody getting in there and needing to seal it up quiet after. I was out that back door in under a minute, moving faster than any doctor would recommend for a man my age. Ray was crouched by the far end of the porch, decking pried up in one corner, flashlight in hand, and there it was, a rectangle cut clean into what I'd always believed was solid concrete footing, patched over with pressure-treated boards that matched the porch framing almost perfectly. Almost. I'd built that porch myself 12 years back with my own 2 hands and a case of beer, and I was looking at a piece of it I had never put there. Ray, step back, I said, and I don't know why I said it, except that something in my chest told me whatever this was, it wasn't for me to open casually. He didn't argue. I called the sheriff's office instead of thinking it through, because Marilyn always said I called for help too fast, and for the first time in my life I was glad of that habit. 2 deputies came out, a young one named Cobb, and an older one, Deputy Hargis, who'd fished with my brother a time or 2. They pulled that hatch open with a crowbar, and the smell that came up was old candle wax and something sour underneath it, like spoiled milk left in a car. The space below was maybe 4 feet deep, 6 feet long, lined with a rug remnant and a battery lantern turned off, empty. Not a person in it, not anymore, but there were signs somebody had been there, a folding camp stool, a case of bottled water with 4 bottles gone, and in the corner, a manila envelope, water-stained at the edges, with a name written on the front in handwriting I did not recognize. The name was Denise Halloway. Deputy Hargis opened it right there with gloves on. Inside were photographs, a woman in her 40s, brown hair, smiling on a beach somewhere, and underneath the photographs, a folded piece of paper that turned out to be a letter, unsigned, addressed to nobody, that talked about the plan and after October and once Walter's out of the way. I want you to understand. Hearing your own name written by a stranger's hand in a hole under your own porch does something to a man that I don't have good words for. It's not fear exactly. It's like watching your house catch fire from a window across the street. You recognize it, but you can't quite believe it's yours. They found the storage facility receipt in Denise Holloway's coat pocket 3 days later, tucked into an evidence bag along with everything else, and that's when Detective Marsh came into the picture. Detective Angela Marsh, mid-50s, the kind of woman who writes everything down in a spiral notebook and never once looks rushed. She sat across from me at my own kitchen table. Same table where Marilyn and I had eaten 10,000 breakfasts, and asked me if I'd ever rented a storage unit off Route 9. I told her no. She told me my name was on the paperwork. Signed, dated, paid in cash, 6 months prior. "Mr. Pruett," she said, watching my face the way you watch a pot you're not sure is boiling yet, "do you know a woman named Denise Holloway?" I said no, and that was true. God is my witness. Completely true. But here's the part I hadn't told Detective Marsh yet, because I needed a night alone with it first. When I went up to our bedroom that evening, I went straight to Marilyn's nightstand, to the drawer where she keeps her devotionals, and the little zippered Bible she's carried to church every Sunday for as long as we've been married, the one with her mother's name embossed on the cover in gold letters, gone soft with age. I opened it, and tucked inside the back cover, between the last page and the leather, was a photograph. Denise Holloway. Same woman from the beach photo, except in this one she was standing next to a car I recognized. Our old Buick, the one we'd traded in 2 years back. Standing next to my wife's car, smiling, in a photograph my wife had hidden inside her own mother's Bible. I sat down on the edge of that bed we'd shared for 3 decades and thought about every anniversary dinner, every Christmas morning, every quiet Sunday where I'd watched her sip that black tea with honey while she read her devotional in the chair by the window, completely unbothered, completely herself. How long had this woman been tucked into the back of that Bible? How long had Marilyn known her? At 64, I figured the worst thing left to happen to a man was his heart giving out or his mind going soft. Turns out, the worst thing is finding out the person who's poured your coffee every morning for 38 years was never fully in the room with you at all. If you're still with me and you want more stories like this one, go on and hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't. It really does help us keep telling them. Here's something nobody warns you about when your own wife is the one who set the trap. It isn't the evidence that gets you. It's realizing the woman beside you in church every single Sunday wasn't distracted, wasn't tired, wasn't going through something. She was working. The whole time, she was working. I need you to understand where my head was at this point, because it matters for what comes next. It had been 8 days since Ray Doss texted me from under my own porch. 8 days since Deputy Hargis pulled a stranger's photograph out of a hole in my foundation. 8 days of Detective Marsh's unmarked sedan parked half a block down, like I wouldn't notice a Ford Crown Victoria idling on a street where everybody drives a pickup or a minivan. Marilyn came home from Charleston 2 days after they found the crawl space. She'd heard bits of it over the phone, enough to know something bad had happened, not enough to know it pointed at her. When she came through that door, she looked exactly the way a worried wife of 38 years is supposed to look. She dropped her bag in the hallway and put both hands on my face. "Walter, what in God's name happened here? Are you all right?" And Lord help me. For about half an hour, I believed her completely. She cried when I walked her out back and showed her the hatch, and I still can't tell you for certain whether those tears were real or the finest piece of acting I've witnessed in 64 years on this earth, because I genuinely could not see the seam. She held onto my arm the whole time Detective Marsh explained the photograph, the letter, the storage unit. "Somebody is doing this to my husband," Marilyn said, gripping my hand across the table hard enough that I remember the ache in my fingers afterward. "Walter would never. You all know Walter." Detective Marsh looked at her for a long moment. "Mrs. Pruett, how can you be so sure?" "Because I've been married to him for 38 years, Marilyn said, without so much as a blink. "I know my husband." I replayed that answer 100 times over the following 2 days. She didn't say I couldn't have done it. She didn't say it wasn't in my nature. She said she knew me, which, if you think about it the way I eventually did, isn't really a defense of my character at all. It's a claim about her own certainty. A woman who's been planning something for a long time doesn't need to argue your innocence. She just needs everyone looking somewhere else, and I know my husband points every single eye back onto her own credibility instead of the evidence. I have a nephew, my sister's boy, named Curtis Voss, who spent 11 years doing claims fraud investigation for an insurance company down in Atlanta before he came back home to open his own little agency. Curtis is the kind of young man who reads a phone bill the way other people read a novel. I called him on day 9 and told him everything, start to finish. He didn't say a word for a long stretch. "Uncle Walt," he finally said, "how many accounts do you and Aunt Marilyn share?" "2. Checking and the savings we kept for the grandkids' college fund. Who handles the books?" he asked. And I opened my mouth to answer, and then just sat there, because the honest answer was Marilyn had handled the books since the second year we were married. Back when I told her plain out that numbers made my eyes glaze over, and she said she didn't mind at all. She was good with figures. 36 years of not thinking twice about it. Pull every statement you can get your hands on, Curtis said. Go back at least 6 years. I pulled 8. And what I found in those statements didn't jump off the page and scream at me, which Curtis told me was exactly the point. There were no big withdrawals, nothing that would have made a bank teller raise an eyebrow. Instead, there were small amounts, quiet and regular, moved out to an account I'd never once seen. 60, 80, $100 at a time, a handful of times a year, plus a recurring charge to a business name that meant nothing to me. Never enough at once to trigger anything. Over 8 years, it came to a little over $41,000, moved so carefully I never noticed a dime of it missing. I sat at my workbench in the garage at 2 in the morning with those printouts spread out under a shop light, and I felt something I can only describe as cold in a way that had nothing to do with October weather. Because this wasn't a woman who'd made a bad decision after some rough year. The first small transfer was dated 14 months after our wedding. She'd started this while we were still hanging our first curtains together in our first little rental house on Danforth Street. Curtis drove up from Atlanta the following weekend, and we laid everything out across my workbench, the bank records, the storage unit paperwork, the sheriff's report, a timeline I'd been keeping on a yellow legal pad since the night I found that photograph. He studied it a long while without saying anything, which I've learned is how careful men behave when what they're looking at is worse than they expected. "The storage unit," Curtis said eventually. "Walk me through where your phone was the week that lease got signed." I thought about it. On my nightstand, same as every night for 38 years, plugged into charge, right next to the bed we shared. "And Aunt Marilyn," Curtis said. "Where was she at night?" "Same bed, same room." And I had never once, not in 38 years, considered a charging phone 6 inches from my sleeping wife's hand to be anything other than perfectly safe. She'd have known my passcode the way you know your own birthday. Taken the phone while I slept. Signed my name to that lease off. Route 9 in handwriting she'd been forging in birthday cards and grocery lists for 3 decades, and been back under the covers before my alarm went off at 5:30. "The gutter call," Curtis said quietly. I looked up at him. "You said you called Doss and Sons that morning. From your cell?" "We don't keep a landline. Hadn't in 15 years. "Cell," I said, and I already knew, somewhere under my ribs, what I was about to find before I found it. The outgoing call to Doss and Sons had gone out from my number at 9:12 that morning. I'd been at the hardware store buying weather stripping since 8:45, and I had a receipt with a timestamp to prove it. Marilyn had made that call. From my phone, while I was 3 miles away arguing with myself over which brand of caulk to buy, to schedule a gutter man she knew would climb up onto that porch, find the hatch, smell whatever she'd left down there, and text me in alarm. She'd built the entire opening scene of this thing herself. The smell, I still don't fully understand how she managed it, though Curtis has a guess involving a jar of something left to spoil on a timer. Nothing complicated, nothing that required more than patience. The hatch itself had likely been built years earlier, during a spell when I'd let a contractor finish the porch alone while I recovered from a knee surgery. 3 full weeks I wasn't out there watching. The photograph, the letter, the timing of it all, set in motion from 400 miles away in Charleston, over dinner with her sister, with one phone call placed on a device I'd trusted completely. Uncle Walt, Curtis said, and his voice dropped into the register menus right before they say something they'd rather not have to. This isn't something a person puts together over a weekend. Money moving for 8 years, a hatch built years back, a woman recruited and photographed and hidden away that takes real patience. She didn't just plan around you. He paused. She studied you like a book she'd already read twice. I stood up and walked out to the edge of the yard and looked at the tomato plants Marilyn had put in every spring for 20 years. Plants I had staked and watered and mulched right alongside her every single season because she said the roots needed a man's steady hand as much as her own. I had knelt in that dirt beside her while she built a hole to bury me in. At 64 years old, I had exactly one card left to play, and I hadn't told Curtis about it yet because it only worked if Marilyn believed, all the way down, that she'd already won. She needed to feel safe a little while longer, and I needed her comfortable enough to stop watching her own back. There's a particular stillness that comes over a man once he stops being scared and starts being careful in a different way. I found that stillness on a Sunday morning in my garage, coffee gone cold, 8 years of bank statements fanned out under that shop light, and I made a decision I have not lost a single hour of sleep over since. I did not hire a lawyer that week. I did not confront Marilyn at the kitchen table. I did not walk what Curtis and I had found straight down to Detective Marsh, because evidence handed over by the man everyone already suspects doesn't clear your name. It just gives a good lawyer more paper to argue about for the next 2 years. Marilyn had planned for a confrontation. She had not planned for silence. So I gave her silence. First I called my younger brother Sam, who spent 22 years in the Marine Corps and has never once in his life raised his voice about anything, which somehow makes him more frightening than men who shout. Sam lives 40 minutes away in Bristol. I told Marilyn I needed a few days at Sam's to clear my head, and I watched her arrange her face into the perfect picture of a patient, understanding wife. "Take all the time you need, honey," she said, and I nearly smiled right there in the kitchen. At Sam's table over black coffee, I told him everything from the hatch under the porch to the $41,000. He listened without interrupting once, which for Sam is the same as another man weeping openly. When I finished, he sat quiet a long moment. "You said she's got a friend she talks to," he said. "Somebody close." "Pat," I said. "Her sister. Lives in Charleston. But there's another one too. Georgette Sims. They've been thick as thieves since high school. Calls her most weeks, long ones, an hour or more, always from the sun porch with the door shut." Sam nodded slow. "You got anything set up out on that sun porch to hear what gets said?" "Sam," I said, "I don't." "I know you don't," he said, "but you're fixing to. I want to be clear about something. I am not by nature a vengeful man. I taught Sunday school for 9 years. I have never raised a hand to another living soul outside of a boxing gym in my 20s. I am the fellow at the church potluck making sure Ruth Ann's husband, who's diabetic, has something he can actually eat. Revenge is not how the Lord built me. But patience is, and it turns out patience is the only tool that matters when you're playing a long game against somebody who's had 8 years head start. Sam ordered a little audio monitor online, paid for it in cash at a pharmacy kiosk, had it shipped to a friend's address in Bristol instead of mine. The kind of quiet operational sense that 2 decades in the Corps apparently never lets a man forget. I drove home Wednesday, told Marilyn I was feeling steadier, let her hold onto me in the doorway a long moment while I counted the beats of her heart against my chest and felt, strangely, almost nothing at all. That absence of feeling scared me more than anger would have. I set the monitor behind the ficus plant on the sun porch windowsill on a Saturday afternoon, while Marilyn was at the grocery store, a plant neither of us had moved an inch in 9 years. Took me all of 5 minutes. I drove out to Sam's that evening, confirmed the signal came through clean on his laptop, and drove home in time for supper. Marilyn had made pot roast. Asked if I was sleeping better. "Getting there," I told her. She smiled and passed me the bread. I waited 17 days. 17 days of being Walter Pruett, devoted husband, cooperative person of interest, quietly answering Detective Marsh's questions while Marilyn held my hand across that same kitchen table and performed worry so convincingly that I myself had moments of doubting the whole thing, wondering if grief and suspicion had led me somewhere my own wife didn't deserve to be led. Then, on a Thursday evening near the end of the 3rd week, Georgette Sims came by for one of their long visits. I told Marilyn I was headed over to Curtis's to look at his truck, kissed her cheek, and drove 3 streets over before I pulled off and opened the app on my phone. The audio came through clear as anything. 20 minutes of ordinary talk, Georgette's grandbaby, a church rummage sale, somebody's hip replacement. I nearly convinced myself I'd wired up my own sun porch for nothing but an old woman's gossip. Then Marilyn's voice changed key, the way a hymn shifts from a major chord to a minor one without you quite noticing the exact second it happened. Quieter, more exact. All the warmth drained clean out of it. He doesn't suspect a thing, Marilyn said. Georgette was quiet a beat. You're certain? Walter's not stupid, Marilyn. Walter sees what's directly in front of him and nothing past it. He always has. That detective's got his name on that lease, his prints in that storage unit, and Denise agreed to stay gone through the end of the month. And after that, by the end of the month, Walter won't need my help sinking. It'll have built its own weight by then. A pause, and then a small, easy laugh. The kind that comes out of a person when a plan is running exactly the way they drew it up. And I'll be settled someplace warm. Pat's already found me a little place near her in Hilton Head. Nobody looks twice at a widow starting over. I sat in that parked car, 3 streets from my own house, and listened to my wife of 38 years laugh softly about the shape of my ruin, and that same strange stillness settled back over me, colder now, and steadier. I want to tell you about Denise Halliway, because she matters in all this too. 2 days after Georgette's visit, I hired a retired county investigator named Otis Beale, a man Curtis vouched for, built like a filing cabinet and about as talkative as one. I gave him a single job: find Denise Halliway. It took him 5 days. She was in a extended stay motel outside Savannah, paying cash, checked in under a name that wasn't quite hers. Otis got photographs, got her talking, got a signed witness statement from a woman who, it turned out, hadn't fully understood the word accessory until a stranger with a badge-shaped retirement pin explained it to her across a motel breakfast table. Denise wasn't a criminal by nature. She was a woman who owed money to the wrong people and made one very bad choice to fix it. She told Otis everything: how Marilyn found her, what she'd been promised, how long she was meant to stay gone. She cried for a good 10 minutes after she signed, and Otis, filing cabinet that he is, sat there with her until she stopped, because some men are decent clean through no matter what they look like on the outside. I now had a recording of my own wife's voice describing my downfall like a woman discussing paint colors, and a signed statement from a missing woman who was never missing at all. 2 things Marilyn had no idea existed. Here's what I chose not to do. I did not march down to Detective Marsh's office and hand it all over, because evidence delivered by the man everybody's already circling doesn't end things quietly. It starts a trial. It gives a good lawyer 18 months to pick every thread of it apart while Marilyn sits comfortable in some rental house, wondering how much I actually know. She was patient. I decided I could be patient too, one more time. On a Friday night, while Marilyn sat on that same sun porch with her devotional and a cup of black tea, honey stirred in slow, I sat at my workbench and sent an audio file and a photograph Denise Halliway, alive, holding up that morning's newspaper outside a Savannah motel from an email address she'd never seen to a phone number she wouldn't recognize. No message attached, nothing signed. I closed the laptop, rinsed my mug, and went to bed. She came upstairs 40 minutes later. I lay there with my eyes barely cracked and watched her stand in the bedroom doorway, phone still in her hand, absolutely motionless. In 38 years, I had never once seen Marilyn Pruett stand still. She was always moving, always fixing something, arranging something, managing something. She stood in that doorway like a woman who'd heard her own name called from an empty room. Good, I remember thinking. Good. The next morning I drove to Detective Marsh's office and set Otis Beale's full report on her desk: statement, photographs, financial records, phone records, all of it in a plain brown accordion folder, because I am not a man who does things halfway. She read for close to 15 minutes without lifting her eyes. Mr. Pruett, she said finally. Walter, I told her. I believe we both know I never signed that lease. She looked at me a long while, then reached for her phone. Marilyn was arrested on a Tuesday morning. 12 charges, including conspiracy and obstruction, walked out of the house we'd shared for 38 years in handcuffs, while the neighbors pretended not to watch from their porches. She looked back at me once, just the once, as Deputy Hargis guided her toward the car, and for the first time since the day I met her at a church social back in 1988, I could not read a single thing behind her eyes. I just nodded at her. Because here is what Marilyn never once understood about the man she married. She'd spent 38 years learning where I kept my keys, what time I liked my supper, how I signed my name on a check. She never spent one single day learning what went on behind my eyes when I went quiet. She'd spent nearly a decade building a hole to put me in. I built her one in 17 days. Somewhere out there tonight, Marilyn Pruett is sitting in a cell wondering how a man she was so sure she'd figured out managed to outweight her. She knew my handwriting. She never once knew my patience. And in the end, folks, that was always going to be the one thing she got wrong. If this story got to you the way I hope it did, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe if you're new here, and tell me down in the comments, would you have waited 17 days like I did, or would you have gone to the law the first hour? I read every one of them. Thank you for sitting with an old man's story tonight. I'll see you next time.